Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, publisher of the Colonial Times Magazine and the vice chair of the board here at LexMedia. We're here for another segment of Coffee with the Candidates, and today I'm with Mark Sandeen. Mark, welcome.
Nice to
We've
see
done
you
this a few
again.
times. We're here to talk about your campaign for selectman, making a transition from another area of service in the town through Sustainable, the Lexington Committee. We can talk about that in a second. Just by way of introduction, I just want people in Lexington to know a little bit about your background.
Thank you.
You are a solar developer, which is beyond a profession. It's a passion, I can tell at this point.
Yes.
Lexington has certainly been very fortunate to have you sort of leading the charge. You've spent most of your career in high tech, working for some very large companies, starting at a very early time in the growth of those companies.
Yes.
And you've also developed and created and established some of your own companies, and you've worked with large budgets, and you've worked under tight time frames.
I have.
Yeah, so all of that, that experience will
Focuses
serve
the mind.
Yeah, it could serve the community quite well. I wanted to mention that you're not just that you are the environment is an important part of what you do, but I know you have a passion for a lot of other things. You've worked to help create the Interfaith Garden. You've also worked with a coalition of environmental groups that passed 8 warrant articles, including community choice.
Yes.
And whether or not people understand this or not, community choice, has saved everybody in this town a considerable amount of money. And I'd like to start a discussion there, because that's a huge thing. I mean, even, it's like when people say, oh, I don't, the environmental thing, it doesn't really mean anything to me, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're saving everybody money.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about that community choice initiative.
Well, if we go back a little bit in time, the town meeting in 2013 said that they wanted the town to take into account in their decisions climate change. And one of the things they asked us to do is they said, let's put together a comprehensive plan. And one of the things you do when you put together a comprehensive plan, the first thing you do is you get some data. And the data said that the most emissions we had in Lexington were coming from the electricity we used. So we said, if that's our number one priority, how do we attack that? And so we looked into and we found that there's a 1997 law, a state Massachusetts law, that said that the communities were allowed to pool the demand for electricity from all of the residents in town and go out together to buy electricity and get a better deal on electricity than they had previously. And we said, why don't we combine that ability to save money on our electricity with the idea to have a better product, to have a greener product? And so what we did in Lexington, we're the first community in the state who was able to go out and buy 100% renewable electricity for less money than we were paying from the utility. So over the first 2 years of that program, we have saved $3 million for average something on the order of 10,000 Lexington customers, electricity customers.
Wow.
Now we've done this twice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an amazing thing. We've reduced the emissions in Lexington by something, electricity emissions by something like 30% by doing this.
Wow.
So it's a big win, and
this is not a token thing.
Right.
This is you're getting significant results,
Right.
significant savings, but significant
right.
Reductions in harmful impact on the environment.
Absolutely. So we look at it, and it's something like 100 million pounds of CO2 a year that's being reduced by this. But most people say, what's that costing me? What it's actually doing is saving the average Lexington electricity customer $15.60 a month this month on your electricity bill.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
That's
possible
awesome.
to do both.
How obviously, this kind of thing is always above my pay grade. I don't quite always understand how you do this. You obviously have a knack and a talent for this. So you're out there able to sort of have this vision where you can look forward and say, okay, let's do this. Let's marry this initiative with this initiative. But how do you go about finding resources to gain 100% renewable energy?
Well, let's first start with the resources you need here in Lexington. So we did this community choice program by going out to other members in Lexington. So turns out, you look around Lexington, you find some nationally recognized expert on just about anything. Well, it turns out in Lexington...
Throwing a few Nobel laureates,
Exactly. It turns out in Lexington we have Paul Chernick, who happens to be one of the most well-known, recognized national experts on how to set electricity rates.
Okay.
And so I said, Paul, can you help us out? And he said, I'm happy to help out.
Wow.
And so we have a little bit of sort of like some bench strength here in Lexington when we go out to procure. We know a little bit more than the average.
We sure do. I know for a while there, Sir Timothy Berners-Lee was here in town.
Right.
When people say, when they talk about who invented the internet, well, this is not the internet. He created the mechanism for harnessing the potential for the internet, creating the World Wide Web. So yeah,
Exactly.
we do have a few folks in Lexington that bring a little,
Yes.
substance to
and
the
his
community.
kids went to Fisk School with my kids at the same time, so
Right.
we ran into Tim Berners-Lee in the halls. So
That's great. Well,
But-
sir, he was knighted, I believe.
You asked about where does the
Yeah.
renewable electricity comes from? Mainly wind energy. So
Okay.
in Lexington, what we're procuring is wind energy. So
Okay.
so when you're plugging your things in at home, you're powered by the wind.
Cool. Well, that's nice. I think people can feel good about it. They
Right.
really can.
Absolutely.
And the naysayers are saving money, so it doesn't,
And the interesting thing is when we started doing this, there were probably 12 towns in the state out of 351 that were doing a community choice program. And there were a lot of folks that said, what is Lexington doing? And now there's 120 communities that are doing the same thing.
right.
So
Community choice, but how about with 100% renewable?
I
you-
believe we're still the only one.
Still the only one. Now, why wouldn't anybody else take advantage of that? I don't understand. I mean, but you basically have created the blueprint for it.
That's right. And so what you're seeing is a lot of communities are doing, Newton, Brookline are
Yeah.
really right up there.
Good.
Cambridge are
Well, good.
following
Well,
right.
I'm glad that we can be leading the way.
So there's a lot of best practices.
Yeah. So let's go with the most obvious thing first. Sustainable Lexington Committee. You've been at the helm of the Sustainable Lexington Committee for a long time.
Yes.
And I know that you're a columnist for the Colonial Times.
That's
and
right.
You've been bringing this forward to the people of Lexington for, we were just talking, it's been almost 6 years you've been running
Right.
the column. And we thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, it really, as I
And
said, it's added a lot to our publication, and it really means a lot to us. So thank
And
you.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So tell us a little bit about the mission of the Sustainable Lexington Committee, what your
Sure.
purview is and all of that.
Yes. So the Board of Selectmen appointed Sustainable Lexington about 10 years ago, I think. Yeah, 2010, 8 or 9 years ago, 2010. And their goal was that they were looking for us to provide some advice and recommendations, as well as develop programs that would address environmental, energy, and other challenges along those lines. And so what we've been doing over this period of time, again, I look at this from a data-driven perspective. When you say sustainable, everybody says, well, what does that mean? And
Right.
what's the definition of that? We're a data-driven organization. We look at the numbers first in order to set priorities. Where are we going to have the biggest impact? And we start to work on programs there. We look at where we're going to have the biggest vulnerabilities, and we say, what can we do to offset those vulnerabilities?
Right. And this is all quantifiable.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's not like at the end of the day you're just feeling good about doing the right thing.
Right.
You have quantifiable evidence that you are making a difference.
Exactly. So, for example, we did a baseline energy and emissions report for the town that identified where all of our emissions are coming from. I mentioned electricity. buildings, we have fuel oil, we have natural gas we use to heat our buildings, we have cars that drive around. It turns out we can get the data on how many miles are driven in Lexington from the Registry of Motor Vehicles, because when you get your registration stickers every year, they know how many miles you've driven, and we can know that the average Lexington vehicle drives 9,400 miles a year. Everybody thinks we drive 12,000 miles a year, but the average Lexington vehicle drives 9,400 miles a year, and we can know exactly what our emissions are from those vehicles.
Right.
So we look at that and we say, our buildings are our number one priority, because buildings are where most of our electricity is going. Transportation is number two. So when we said, okay, we've done some things for the building world, let's look at transportation. Last year we started a program called Lex Drive Electric. In the Lex Drive Electric program, we again pooled the buying resources of the community in Lexington and said, let's go out and pre-negotiate with the car dealers the best deal that we can possibly get in the area.
Really?
Absolutely. And so then when you want to buy an electric car, you can go in with the check, put it down, take the keys of the car and leave, no hassles, and we're saving up to $6,000 or $7,000 a car on a brand new purchase of a car.
You're talking about any Lexington resident
Any
who wants to go in, and so you have this pre-negotiated arrangement where people will come in and
once a month we're working with an organization that goes out and pre-negotiates the best deals with dealers across the whole place. So when my daughter got a car, we went down about an hour drive away and saved $7,000. It was a good use of an hour drive.
I would think so. I would think so. And I noticed I see more and more electric vehicles in town. You know, whether it's a Tesla or something else, but because you can see the plates.
Right.
Many of them are proud enough that they actually want to register, and because there is a there's a tax benefit to this too, and I don't know if that's going away, but I know there has been a tax benefit.
So yes, there are some other benefits from federal and from state, but we are in a situation. One of the things that I really like to talk to folks about is up until October of this year, Lexington had more electric vehicles than any other community in the state. More than Boston, more than Cambridge, more than Arlington. So right now, Newton has pulled out ahead of us. We're number 2 in the state.
We hate being number 2. We hate being number 2. So we're going to have to slip back into first place.
But we doubled the number, more than doubled the number of electric vehicles in the last year.
And there's a lot of accommodation. I know several years ago we added some electric charging stations in the area behind Edison. I don't know if there are some others that have been added.
So Larry Link and I got the grant money from the state to do that, and that was in 2012. And we put in 3 charging stations there. We're coming to town meeting this year to expand those charging stations from 3 to 13.
In that same area, or
in Depot Lot and behind Michelson's in the lot over there.
Very good.
And so turns out we're getting Eversource to pay most of the cost of doing those charging stations.
Good.
So in
Good.
the first
That's
ones
great
in
publicity for
2012,
them, as they should.
Right.
I thought that public-private partnership of adding the parking lots behind, I mean, they had a piece of grass there that they were paying to maintain. We had a need. So they come at the town as it was a true public and private partnership to we needed more parking. So now we use that for parking. They don't have to pay to maintain it in terms of cutting the grass and all of that. And look what it's done for the town, and that's where we have the charging stations.
Right.
So it's worked out well. I think for the most part they've been good to work with. So, but having them pay for it, I'd much rather have them pay for it than the town of Lexington. So
they're doing all the cost of putting the infrastructure in place. We're buying the chargers, and it turns out there's a grant from the state to pay for 80% of the chargers. So, so we're going to get some charging stations. And right now, the ones we have are full, if you look at them.
I think it's awesome. Yeah, they are full. They're always full.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. And I know they have them, credit where credit's due, they have them up at a Lofton Element Hotel.
They do, absolutely.
Yeah, so.
And a number of other places in Lexington.
Right. Those are the 2 I've seen. I was there when we launched those, and I was there when we launched the ones there, and the ones we just spoke about.
For example, Shire just put in, Takeda.
Takeda, exactly.
just put in 10 charging stations up in their parking lot.
Yeah. So boy, they are truly a good corporate citizen.
They are.
They really are. We work well with them in meeting the Chamber of Commerce, so it's been great. Now, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I want people to know that you do have another side. Sure. I do want to ask, because this is significant, solar in Lexington. Because
Yes.
that's another thing. I know that's something that you've been way out in
Sure.
front on. We have the new solar area down on
At the composting facility on Hartwell.
on Hartwell Ave. But that's also had a significant economic impact.
Absolutely. So we put, in 2014, we put solar on many of our schools in town and the library. And in 2017, we put solar on the composting facility. Those two projects are generating something on the order of 45% of all of Lexington's municipal electricity demand.
Wow.
And this year, generating $600,000 in revenue for the town. That's real money coming in the door.
That's real money. That's not chump change. That's
Right.
real money.
Right.
And I understand we have a very large budget, but $600,000 is not to be sneezed at.
No, it's
Yeah.
real money.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, I just came this afternoon from a meeting with our solar development team, who are looking out now to do some canopies on some of the other parking lots in town, and for Hastings School and for the LCP school. And we believe that we're going to be able to double the amount of electricity produced from solar with these new installations.
Right.
And also, we think that those installations will be more than enough to completely power the new Hastings School and completely power, by a factor of 2, the new LCP school. So we'll have net zero schools that will have zero electricity costs to the town to operate, and will be running cleaner. And
Wow. That's amazing. It really is an amazing thing. Let's talk a little about some other issues.
Sure.
There are a whole variety of different things I have here. Let's talk about streetscape, because that's coming up at town meeting, the Center streetscape. How you spend a lot of time getting acquainted with what's about to come into town meeting. It's a project that's been
Sure.
in the offing for some time, and now it's coming to town meeting finally after, Howard Levin has been sort of the chair of that committee and ushering that thing
Right.
through, and he's done an extraordinary job, and it's not been easy because there have been a lot of people pulling in.
And years of work.
Yeah, and years of work, lots of work.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of concern about bricks versus that, because the disability community has some concerns about that. I imagine that they'll want to be heard at town meeting, but it looks like we're finally going to get a vote there. So
Right.
what are your thoughts on that? Are you looking forward to it? Are you just hoping it passes? Are you an advocate of this?
Well, when you talk to most of the people who are working on the Center streetscape, what they're focused on is how do we revitalize our center area, right? And one of the things that we can do is by ensuring that we're having proper streetscape. But there's a bigger picture that we need to be looking at if we want to be revitalizing the center. One of the things that I hear over and over from residents in town is, what are we doing in order to encourage more retail shops?
Right.
And one of the things, and the Center streetscape is going to help with that. But when you talk to the retail owners, they're saying the rents are high, the
Right.
foot traffic is low, and there's a lot of pressure there. So what
Right.
can we do about that? So one of the things you might think about in concert with a Center streetscape is maybe looking at, is it possible to raise some of the height restrictions in the center of town? And the idea there is that if there were some new revenue for the landlords from office space above the areas, they might be able to have a little bit lower rents for the retail areas.
Right.
And if there's some more people in the center of town who need to go and have lunch and go do a little shopping at lunchtime, there'd be more foot traffic for this folks. And so the idea is,
Right.
if we get our center streetscape in place, what you want to do is you want to be able to have them someplace to go.
Right.
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 And so I think these things are integrated, right? You have to look at them as a whole. And so from my perspective, I'd be looking at how is it possible to help the businesses like Michelson's and the Theater Pharmacy and other folks like that have a better chance of thriving and surviving in the town, in the world we're in, as well as bring in other retail opportunities, because if you can do 3 or 4 things at once, you're going to do more.
Right.
And so I also think that one of the things that we've been doing in Lexington is focusing on how do we get more walking access to the center of town. And so one of the things the Greenways Corridor Committee is done, and they created the Across Lexington Trail. So just about right now, anybody in Lexington from different parts of Lexington can walk safely into the center of town. And we know when somebody walks into town, they'll spend more money in town than if they just drove into the center of town.
Right, right. It's funny though, you know, you talk to people, some people like are south side, some people are north side. You know, some people just will never park on the south side, some people will never go there, but
Right.
I try to go all over. But but yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and you need people to sort of stop and enjoy. I like some of the things that Melissa Gentopoulos and Economic
Absolutely.
Development Office has been doing with
The
just
parklets.
The parklets. The parklets are awesome, and you know, I know they had tried to do something there in the Grain Mill Alley. You know, they're still working
Exactly.
with the building owners there.
And we
but-
shouldn't forget East Lexington.
Right. Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
I think it's very important because I know the Chamber of Commerce is now working on an initiative
Right.
to bring some beautification out there, and
Exactly.
and we've talked to the DPW, we've talked
Right.
to some of the other members of the Board of Selectmen about including East Lexington when we do celebrations and other things.
How do we make it a destination instead of a drive-through?
Right.
Right? And so one of the things, the bike path goes right through there, right?
Right.
And so at the back of those buildings, you might take Melissa's idea of some parklets that are just do a wonderful thing. It makes you want to stop
Right.
and sit in front of the Ride Studio Cafe there, right?
Right.
If we could have some of these parklets maybe on the bike side, then you could have some place to have
Right.
some lunch
You've
or
got
a
Great
bagel.
Harvest Bread that's an outdoor cafe there.
Exactly, right?
And
And
it
have a
would be
little
nice.
reason to stay and relax, and it becomes
Right.
becomes a destination.
Well, we hope so. I don't know, did we talk about Hotwell Avenue?
We haven't.
Okay.
We should.
I'd like to. Hotwell Avenue, there's been a lot of talk about, you know, the burden, the residential tax burden.
Yes.
Trying to do things to help alleviate that, including taking a hard look at some changes along
Yes.
along Hotwell Ave, maybe even Hayden Ave at some point. But I know there's been some significant discussion about Hotwell Avenue.
Exactly.
I know a few years ago, you may recall, there was a major effort put on to increase the FAR there.
Right.
But because apparently it didn't go too far, or far enough,
Right.
there was no real follow-up. There was no, I mean, the landowners there, the building owners just,
Not quite enough. Yeah.
right. So hopefully, I think the stakeholders are all coming together, but interestingly enough, and I think it's kind of an exciting proposition that they're talking about mixed-use development
Exactly.
in there, which would include, I assume, some retail, some residential, and, you know, considerable amount of new industrial and research.
So as part of the Getting to Net, I was chair of the Getting to Net Zero Emissions Task Force, and we pulled together, I mentioned to you how, you know, the strength of our community is we have internationally and nationally recognized experts in everything. It turns out one of the internationally recognized experts in this kind of revitalization of districts is Paul Lucas, who's a local architect in Lexington. He was on our stakeholders. And he suggested that maybe we want to sit down with the largest business owners in the area, and it turns out they're also on our task force. We had Shire at the time, now Takeda,
Right.
Boston Properties, King Street Properties, all on the Getting to Net Zero Emissions Task Force. We probably had something on the order of 20 meetings with them to talk about exactly this issue. What would it take to revitalize the Hartwell Avenue area? And they said a number of the things that you've said already, which is we have some restrictions that keep the amount of square feet that we have available to the area sort of limited. We've got lots of lawn space. If we could make these, if we could bring in some mixed use, some services, some restaurants, a place to have a beer after work, a place to have a cup of coffee
Right.
on the way into work.
Right, more than just Waxy's, right.
Exactly, right. Waxy's is a wonderful place, but
Right.
you got to have something more than
Something more.
just one place.
Doesn't do it, right.
People are looking for options. And if you can do that in a way that what they're looking for is, they say that will allow us to attract biotech and pharmaceutical, the younger crowd that want to come in from Cambridge, and they're looking for some public transportation. So if you can do three things, which is look at your zoning, look at some bringing some services in, some public transportation, we believe we can double the number of square feet there. These biotech and biopharmaceutical folks use about half the number of people per square foot as an office space. They generate twice the tax revenue per square foot
Right.
as an office space. So we get twice the tax revenue, half the people,
Right.
and
Right, and it's
It's a
kind of,
win-win-win.
it's an obvious step forward for us because we do have the reputation of sort of being the,
Right.
the area biotech capital.
We have to look at the concerns of the neighbors from a traffic perspective.
Right, that's very important,
Because
no doubt.
you have to do all these things combined. And the thought is, how do we do this in a thoughtful way that
Right.
doesn't put any more burden on the neighborhood
Right.
than is already there? But we think it might be possible to quadruple the commercial tax revenue from Hartwell. We're getting $8 million there right now. If in 10 years or 15 years we can say we're getting $32 million a year, that's $25 million.
Right.
That's $24 million. That's real money.
Right,
And it's about enough to pay for a high school.
right. Right, because we'd have to bond that out over a certain period of time, and you're
Exactly.
absolutely right. And I think it is looking forward down the road, and I know that even now, they've been talking and implementing mass transit strategies that have helped reduce the amount of vehicles that are coming along
Exactly.
Hartwell Ave. I know that they have direct shuttles out to
Right.
Alewife and others, and, credit where credit is due. I know the town transportation offices work with Economic Development Office
Yes.
to sort of institute those initiatives, and it's really helped.
And I would say the Economic Development Advisory Council has been working on these things for quite a while, and they're already having some positive results in terms of attracting biotech and pharmaceutical companies to the area. We can do more. We should do more. It's a big ship. It's a super tanker. It's going to take a long time to turn.
Right.
We need to start now.
Right.
So that 7 years from now, when we're coming up for a debt exclusion on a high school, we have some extra money in our wallet.
Right. Excellent. We're coming up on town meeting. If
Yes.
you're elected, you're going to be sitting up in the big chair.
Yes.
And you'll have something to say. You'll have an impact because on most major issues of policy and finance, they go to the Board of Selectmen for their input. We've got, I understand, 10 citizen articles coming up. We've got a
Yes.
lot of things coming up. The thing, and this kind of, again, sort of backs into some of your environmental issues that I know are so near and dear. The Girl Scouts have created this initiative for banning plastic straws. And I know there's a sort of a tandem article, too, that sort of then includes polystyrene products,
Yes.
plastic cutlery, stuff like that, or polystyrene cutlery, and the containers.
Right.
Last year, we worked very closely, the Chamber of Commerce did, with
Exactly.
trying to make sure the language for the bag ban wasn't so rigid that it would really have an adverse effect on business. So we were able to come to an arrangement,
yes.
and we were able to endorse it at town meeting. We're still working with these folks now, but what do you think about this? I mean, I'm delighted that the Girl Scouts are doing this as a sort of a civics initiative.
Right.
I think it's wonderful. But I wonder if it's too far a reach on the straw ban. I mean, there are some issues about disability and the ability to, that some folks do need to use straws and others. But I don't know the exact language. I don't know if you do. But do you think it's a step in the right direction, or should we continue the dialogue?
What I should say is that I've asked them to come and present to the Sustainable Lexington Committee in a couple weeks.
Okay.
So I haven't seen the language yet.
Okay.
I haven't reviewed the language. I haven't heard their presentation. But last year, when the plastic bag ban was passed, there was a lot of talk about how our oceans are likely to fill up with plastic if we don't change the way we're going.
Right.
And so Sustainable Lexington's recommendation at the time was that, yes, this is a support. We supported the plastic bag ban with the changes that you had suggested.
Right.
But we suggested at that time that we ought to be taking a broader look at plastics in general. And so I'm very excited that they're bringing this forward. We haven't looked at what their language is. I don't know
Right.
what the impacts will be yet. But I think as sort of an overarching goal, we need to figure out ways to reduce the amount of plastics that are making it into our oceans.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Like with us, we're looking at the impact of it because we have so many businesses. There's so many businesses use the plastic bags, but so many more make use of the straws. There are some disability considerations, people who need to use straws to,
That's true.
I think the conversation needs to go on a little further, but I do, regardless of the politics and the outcome and all that, I do applaud the Girl Scouts for bringing this initiative forward. I think anybody who takes time to learn about civics and participate in civics
Absolutely.
it's applaudable.
Right, and you had mentioned town warrant articles, one of our earliest town warrant articles was to put solar on the schools. And at the time, we had a group of third graders who called themselves Save Tomorrow, and they came and they testified in front of town meeting and said, we'd like to have solar on our schools. And the moderator allowed a standing ovation, even though that's not allowed.
Right. There's no celebration. We'll have no celebration here at town meeting.
Right. But for them, they did. Now these girls are in high school, just to tell you how long ago that was.
Wow.
But the fact is that it changed their lives. They have now sort of gone on to different careers because they took that step of being civically engaged, and I applaud that. It's tremendous.
It really is. It's an incredible learning experience, I think. For everyone should be required to engage in civics somehow.
That's right.
So whether it's in the classroom, but I think more practically speaking out in the real world. We're going to come to a close soon. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to sort of talk about briefly, and then I'm going to ask you to sort of make a closing comment?
Sure. Most folks are aware that we're building a new Hastings school right now, and a new Lexington Children's Place. And 5 years ago, the Board of Selectmen asked me to lead a team of folks who could propose new standards for the school. And from a health, from an environmental perspective, from a safety perspective, from a resilience perspective. And we did that, and we pulled together a great organization of folks who looked at what we could do from a health perspective, because we said to ourselves, our kids are spending 90% of their time inside. And what are we going to do to ensure that they're breathing the healthiest quality air, but do this in a way that is environmentally sound? And so what we were able to do by holding these two things, which most folks would think are contradictory, together at the same time, we were able to cut the emissions, we were able to cut the energy use for the building in half. From a normal, standard, conventionally designed building, we were able to increase the air quality so that there's 20% higher productivity, cognitive performance for the students and for the teachers. And because we were able to do that by cutting the energy down and bringing the environmental air quality up, we could generate enough electricity from the rooftops and the canopies out in the parking lots to power that building 100% from renewable energy. Wow. So we get a healthier building, we get a more resilient building, we get a building that is saving the town. We think it can generate as much as $400,000 a year and better and lower operational costs. So when we think about, we're able to do that with the Hastings School, which is going to, and then we're looking at the high school, we're saying, if we could do that for the high school, which is going to be 4 times larger.
Right, this would be like a pilot for that.
Right. So then we're in the business of excellence in education in Lexington, right? And what are the outcomes we desire? We want people to have good cognitive performance. We want them to perform better on their tests. If we design our buildings in order to do that, and we get at the same time not only better performance for our students, but lower operating costs for our schools, $1.6 million over the next 20 years, that's $32 million.
Right.
That's real money.
Again, you're right, and it's a win-win-win situation.
And that's what
it takes vision.
We have to think.
And you seem to have a lot of it. So that's a good thing.
Right.
I'm going to leave it there. I wish we had much more time. You're really a very interesting guy. I know you've done a lot over the course of these years, and I know you're very passionate about what you do. I want to wish you the best in the campaign. So now I'll ask you to sort of make a closing comment to the people in Lexington, as Election Day is approaching, why they should go to the polls and pull a lever for Mark Sandeen.
Well, sure. So the reason I'm running for Board of Selectmen is because we're at a critical time in the history of Lexington right now. We're probably going to be making the biggest investment in a generation in a new high school, and we ought to be designing that high school in a way that's going to perform well for our students and perform well for our budgets. And so that's one of the things I want to look at. I want to also look at how, as the Board of Selectmen's role is to figure out how we're going to raise financing to do that. We think we can look to our commercial districts, to revitalizing our commercial districts, both in the center as well as Hartwell zones and Hayden zones. And we think that if we do these types of things together, getting better services out there, getting better public transportation out there, getting more biotech out there, we can quadruple the tax revenue from our commercial property, and that could be enough to pay for our high school. So those are the kinds of things that I would like to be doing as a selectman. I'm a data-driven person, as you've heard, but I'm motivated by the heart. This is what I'm all about, is making the quality of life better for Lexington residents. And if you would like to do that, please work with me. I look forward to working with you, and I hope I can earn your vote on March 4th.
Okay. Mark, thanks for being with us. I wish you all the best in the election.
Well, thank you so
All
much,
right?
Jim.
And thanks for your work with the Colonial Times.
Oh, absolutely.
Appreciate that, Mark.
It's a pleasure.
Great. Thank you.